everyone. Welcome to episode 5 of I Am Employed. We will be talking with alum from Owen just to see about their experiences in their respective fields. I am surrounded virtually by some alum who are now employed and graduated from Vanderbilt from various programs, and I'm going to pass it off to James to start to introduce himself.
Hey everyone, and thanks for having me. This is awesome. Happy to be involved. James Edward Murray, currently based in Brooklyn, New York. Graduated from the MBA program at Vanderbilt Owen in 2017. Currently working at Facebook on the media partnerships team, leading our work with digital publishers in the US. So working with publishers like BuzzFeed and Business Insider and Vox. With an emphasis on kind of driving adoption of a lot of our video products like Facebook Watch, Facebook Live, Instagram TV, and so forth. Also lead an organization called TheraMatch. We're changing our name to Therify. But the whole idea and mission is we're making mental health therapy more accessible for people of color.
Hey everyone, my name is Thea Winston. I graduated from Owen with a MAG in 2019, and I work at EY in Atlanta in their forensics and integrity services practice. My focus is in investigations and compliance, and that's a little bit about me.
Hi everyone, Michael Nottage. I graduated from the MBA program last year, actually in 2020. Coming into that, I was running an ICU group inside Nashville, one of the centers in Nashville. And then right now, I'm one of the corporate medical directors for a new healthcare company that is working on virtual healthcare models at a hospital. And then, I still work in the ICU from time to time.
All right, so we're coming from different programs at Vanderbilt. So just to get, seeing how your experience was at Vanderbilt, what was it like and did it prepare you for the current culture environment that you're in?
I was already doing some management stuff before I started the program, and that's actually what made me start the program. And it was really nice to have, some validation of some thoughts I had. It was really nice again to kind of go through this mind expansion process and, establish some really, really valuable networks. And it was good. And I think that there are some things that have helped with what I'm doing now. And then there's just some things where there was nothing that could have prepared me for some of the stuff I'm working on.
Yeah, I would definitely say it prepared me for where I am now. The transition, I feel like from going to graduate school to starting my career, it was pretty seamless. One of the things I really liked about my program that really prepared me was just the way it's set up and the certification process. So the MAC program, it really sets you up to pass your CPA in the summer before you start, which is really important because it's hard to focus on those certifications once you start work. You're really busy working crazy hours during the week, and so you really don't have that time to study. So it was nice to get that out of the way. Then outside of just like technical skills, it really prepared me for, the networking aspect of the job. And then, but like Michael said, that there are some things that, you walk into, especially with this pandemic, that Vandy couldn't have prepared us for. But, you have the skills in your toolbox to make sure you thrive in that environment anyway.
I was muted. I would piggyback on all that. When I started in the MBA program, I was 29. I think MBA is probably a little older. So, I'd worked for a while. I knew that at some point after Owen, I'd wanted to start a business. Like no one in my family has ever started a business, and that was a goal of mine. I didn't know like when it would be though, like if maybe I would work first and what happened was Owen just ended up, providing me with a bunch of resources. I took a class called Launching the Venture with Michael Bertram, where I, basically started the seed of what my business would be. You know, I did the SOAR grant and got some funding. So like, you know, even though I was a broke, you know, 2-year MBA who hadn't made money in 2 years, I decided to start a business, you know, full time coming out of Owen. Um, and I think, you know, as a first time founder, I came out, you know, it was my first legitimate business, and I ran it for, you know, 2.5 years. I made so many mistakes. Like I made so many mistakes. And you know, as an entrepreneur, you have to kind of do everything. You know, you gotta do sales, you gotta do marketing, you gotta do strategy, you gotta do product. So every day you're learning something new that you didn't know the day before. And I would say, like, you know, there's nothing that Owen could have done to prepare me to avoid all those mistakes. Entrepreneurship is just something that you learn as you with experience, but they did give me the opportunity to get in there and try, you know what I mean, and fail. And it ended up being the most prolific learning experience of my entire life. And I probably wouldn't, you know, be in the position at Facebook that I'm in now if I didn't have that experience. And I know, you know, with my work around mental health and hopefully starting a business around that eventually, you know, I'm going to be so much more successful, you know, because I learned from those mistakes that Vanderbilt put me in a position to be able to make and learn from. So I definitely, you know, thank Vandy for that.
I would just like to add to that. I think that was very well said. I think for me, I probably underestimated how beneficial the networking at Vanderbilt was going to be. And part of that is I'm a bit further along in my career, and I was, you know, the physician world is pretty small, and you know, and it's still like since I finished Vandy, there's all these doors opening, and one of the things the company I'm in now, the CEO, my immediate predecessor, who kind of basically cold called me out of the blue, they're all Owen graduates.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm not sure, but they may have just done an Owen alumni search and found me that way. So, you know, I have
Yeah.
people reaching out to me, and you find that sometimes the common element is that we're all Owen graduates. So it's, you know, I think that we say that people say that a lot, that, you know, you're really going to business school and graduate school, and contacts are a major part of it. I don't think people appreciate sometimes how important that is. I certainly did not.
And then just speaking on networking, how would you say Vanderbilt prepared you socially in regards to networking and the fun side of Vanderbilt and actually transitioning into social, whether it was office hours, coffee chats, anything? Like, how did Vanderbilt prepare you for that?
I'll jump in on that one. One thing I would say is that it really taught you how some of your most important connections are made in those fun times. So like, you know, at Owen, we would do, what's it called? The Bell, whatever. But like on Fridays after 5, like, you know,
Closing bell.
it's a really closing bell. There we go. It's like a really social hour, but you meet a lot of great people during that time. Like for me in the MAC, I know sometimes we felt like we could be a little isolated from the MBA program, but it was at Closing Bell where I met other MBAs, met the MARCs, met the MSF people. So I think it's really, Vandy really taught you how to take advantage of those fun situations. Like, yeah, it's fun, but it's also a great time to meet new people. And then that way, when you do have a connection, you have a real connection, not based on, you know, just being useful to each other.
I'm gonna be honest, like I I I think some people, you know, go to grad school at Vandy and like meet their best friends that'll be like, you know, like their road dogs forever. You know, that wasn't really my experience. Like you know, I had great relationships with all my classmates and, you know, still stay in touch with some of them. But like, you know, I kind of already, you know, my best friends were from before, you know, and you know, you know, I went to Closing Bell and did everything. But I didn't walk away with that. Like, you know, this is, you know, my Vandy people are the ones that I go on vacations with, like, you know. But I will say what what I really did kind of develop it at Vanderbilt is a better sense of like executive presence and confidence um, in kind of corporate arenas. And I think that's just because I had a lot of exposure to, senior leaders at companies. I kind of put myself out there at Vanderbilt itself, and like, had the opportunity to work with George Hill, who at the time was the vice chancellor of equity, diversity, inclusion. you know, um, had opportunities to talk to the chancellor and other, senior kind of people on campus, and just like be able to socialize with folks who are in very high level positions in a way, in a safe space where I could make mistakes, and be myself. So I think there's a lot of confidence that through the social experience on Vanderbilt's campus, I was able to kind of get access to, that helped me a lot going through the process.
I'll be honest. I'll also be honest.
Honesty.
Having been, kind of having been a bit further along in my career, I don't think I went to it really with the idea of socializing as much as I probably should have. I was running a big ICU program. I was expanding, and I was driving organizational goals across the health system. And so I actually went really with a very focused mindset of expanding my toolkit. And I was then pleasantly surprised by some of the things. Now again, I should clarify, I was in the executive MBA program. And, I used to look wistfully at the MBA folks doing the closing bell thing. And I would literally be walking through there from the hospital in scrubs, running to a meeting, and then leaving to go back to the hospital. So I don't think I had that much exposure to it. But I will say this: the other thing I've also learned to be comfortable is my way of socializing is different. I'm very comfortable with the fact that I'm an introvert, and so I'm much more likely to get something out of a coffee meeting, or a smaller, group of, 5 or 10 people over a period of time where we're talking, than, in a big kind of crowded arena like that. I can be there and kind of sing along with the rest of the people and drink, which I did in my previous stint in grad school. But that was really not a big part for me here. I was more likely to make a lunch meeting or a coffee meeting and sit down with someone and talk for a couple of hours than that. And that was very helpful. And Mike Bertram was actually, I thought it was, I hadn't really thought of a business, but he actually made me start thinking more in that startup space, which is, I think, one of the reasons why I ended up where I am now.
That's cool. And then just speaking on introverts versus extroverts, with your transition into your career, how was that with meeting new people, making sure that you're leaving a mark wherever you go when introducing yourself? So what was that like for you guys in your respective fields?
I think for me, it's different for everyone, right? Like, I would describe myself as an extroverted introvert, right? So like, I've got a social battery. I have, only so much that I can give. Um, and I'm pretty good at going into new situations and being friendly and socializing and forging alliances, but like also setting boundaries. You know what I mean? So, and I think entrepreneurship gave me something interesting. It gave me something interesting to talk about every time. Like when I started at Facebook, everyone was asking about like my previous business. And I realized that although Facebook is an entrepreneurial place, there are a lot of people there that haven't started businesses, right? So, I think it is important, going into a new company, in building relationships and finding people who can be mentors and sponsors, and give you the inside scoop on things that you might not know otherwise, you know? Um, but also as an introvert, being able to say, okay, like, I went to the last happy hour, I'm not going to go to this one. That's okay. And I just made it a point to say, like, I'm not going to go to everything because that's just impossible to me and I'm going to be drained out. But I'm going to be selective about the things I'm going to go to and make sure that I'm doing enough.
Question, did you start that as soon as you got to Facebook, or did you build that over time?
You know, I started it pretty immediately, and it's kind of hard not to, because basically what they do is they have pre-pandemic, they have these kind of weekly kind of new hire onboardings where they fly everybody out to Menlo Park in California, and they basically force you in a room together. You know what I mean? And they have all these social activities planned for you on campus. You go to lunch together. You know, you have to go out of your way to not be social. Like, you have to hide in a corner. And then once you actually get into the office, it's an open, you know, it's an open floor plan. So like, I sit right here, my boss literally sits right next to me. You know what I mean?
Intimate.
So it's very intimate. So I definitely, you know, for folks going into tech, I do recommend, like, even, you know, a lot of introverted people, but you do have to kind of navigate, you know, understanding that there's no way to get out of, you know, socializing and talking to people unless you literally hide, right? Like, these companies are optimizing for collaboration. So it's just something to know when you're going into the industry.
And then what about for EY?
Yeah, I was gonna say I agree completely with pretty much everything he just said. You know, for me, I feel like networking was definitely something I had to work on. Like when I first started, like in undergrad, going to these different events, like it didn't come naturally to me. So I feel like that's definitely something that, you know, you build upon, and you just have to put yourself out there and say, like, you know what, there isn't any way I can get around this. So let me make it meaningful when I do go. Like, let's be intentional with the stuff that I go to so that I'm not going to everything and feeling drained, because it's like, when you go to these networking events, I feel like, especially for the Black community, you have to be on. I don't know how else to put that, but like, you really have to put forth like yourself and put yourself out there. And so it's hard to be on 100% of the time. And if you're doing it every day, every week, it's going to drain you. So I think for me, I just had to, one, learn how to network, and then two, be intentional on what I was going to and who I was talking to, because it can get draining for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think for me a big part of it was being authentic in my outreach and interfacing with people, and being comfortable in what was authentic for me. And so I don't necessarily think about connecting with a broad group of people or a narrow group of people as a monolithic thing. You know, there are certain circumstances in which I seem pretty extroverted. And so, you know, when people learn that I'm a bona fide, certified, verified introvert, sometimes they're quite surprised. Um, but I think I really, for me, a big part of it was realizing that, you know, most of the things you're going to do in life require connecting with people. And for you to do that in a way that is not draining to you or delegitimizing to you, you have to do it in a way that feels authentic for you. Um, and and you know, slowly grow those relationships. And so I kind of learned to do that. Now, you know, I'm in a forward, outward facing profession. So, you know, I have to sit down and talk with people in very intense situations anyway. So I've always learned that on off thing. But because when I'm on, it's so intense. When I go off, I switch off. I tend to switch really off. And so, you know, kind of learning how to do that. And, you know, one of the great things about Owen was that they actually, especially in my year, they didn't have in previous years, they actually got us executive coaching. And I think I'd tried a little of that before, but it was very helpful sitting down with the executive coach and sometimes just affirming that some things I did were okay. And, you know, giving me different ways to look at things, which was helpful. And then, you know, some of the other career development stuff that was really packaged in there. And also the human capital management pieces were very, very helpful to see that there is a whole body of work and science behind that, and kind of giving me the tools to think about how, what I do affects people, how to take even better care of my people, that sort of thing. And so it was very helpful, but I think the thing I came away from that was just really working on being my authentic self, and just like James said, sometimes you really have to set boundaries for that. And so I certainly, a happy hour, loud music, that sort of thing is fun. It was fun when I was much younger, but it's not the environment that I finish from work and think, oh yeah, let's go do that now. So I don't necessarily feel like I'm going to be doing that with most people when they want to meet up. Can I survive in that environment? Sure.
And just to add to that, I remember feeling drained at closing bell. Like I'm gonna keep it real. Like, it didn't feel like a release to me, because to Michael's point, like that wasn't the way that I, like I'd done, like I lived in New York before I came to business school and did like my young 20s and did all the drinking and stuff. And I was just kind of past that point, I would have much rather just gone to like a lounge or something and kicked it with a few people. I didn't need like loud music and kegs and you know what I mean? And there are a lot of people that really enjoy that, but I think it's just important that these institutions create options for folks and realize that everyone socializes differently. So just wanted to add that as well.
And I think we're like highlighting buzzwords that are very underrated, like boundaries, like introvert versus extrovert. Because as me coming in and like not having work experience and now going into the work field, all I hear is happy hours. Like, you gotta make sure you network, happy hour, network, happy hour, network. So now to hear like, oh yeah, you have to set boundaries. You have to understand who you are. You gotta be intentional. I think those are for sure underrated buzzwords that need to be projected and need to be highlighted for sure. And
I would just say one thing to that is, 20 years ago, when I thought about MBA, it was synonymous with going out and drinking every night. And then one of my friends who actually graduated from an MBA program, and I knew a lot of people in the Wharton crowd, because I was in the Northeast for a bit. And that's all I ever saw them doing. I was like, this is such a waste of time, waste of money. And I hate that stuff. I mean, but I'd actually gone through a DJ phase and partying phase and all that. And I was like, I don't have time for that. But one of my friends, she never once went to happy hour. And she's done great. She's pretty high up in Google. And she was like, no, you have to make sure you do what feels right for you. But, you still need to connect with people. Just connect in your own way,
And I want to know, like, for your respective industry, what is it like to be someone that is Black? Like, are you guys a part of affinity groups? Like, do you guys feel like you're maybe networking, not necessarily networking, but working strategically to accomplish the goals you have because you are Black, or anything of that sort? In your respective industry, it doesn't have to be company specific either.
I'm happy to kick that off. So I'm a Black physician. We're very rare, relatively speaking. I really try not to make my existence about that. I do feel like you often have to be 120, 160% on your game to be considered normal. And that's really consistent with who I am anyway. So, I'm always tickled with this thing of people saying we're colorblind. I think, my color doesn't affect how I operate internally. I think my margin of error is somewhat narrower than, other people. And I'm okay with that. I do think that even though the system says it's colorblind, the fact that I'm a functional, performing Black physician actually, in a way, is an added thing for any position I apply to at this level. That's a company, sometimes it's pretty obvious that that's a company's approaching me because they need to check that box off of they have a Black executive physician. And so a couple of the things I've turned down were very interesting, but I was like, I'm not sure that there's much value here that is related to my interests. But it was very clear. In fact, there've been a couple of times when we've had some discussions where, you know, my ethnicity or color was a big part of it on their end, and then they suddenly realize as I start to talk of other things, because, you know, there's other things about me I think that are compelling, that they say, oh wow, okay, that's actually true, you bring that to the table too. And I'm like, actually that's what I really bring to the table. But anyway, but yeah, I think that at this level in, you know, in business and industry, it's very hard for it not to matter. I just think that you can't let it matter as much to you. You know what I mean? Of course, you can't let yourself be misused or anything, and, you know, but don't be looking for that.
For me, I feel like I'm still pretty young in my career. So I'm definitely like I'm joining the affinity groups. I'm talking to the Black execs, talking to the other Black people in the office just to make those connections. Like I definitely like Michael said, I don't want me being Black to define my presence. Like he said, I'm intelligent. I belong at this table, and it's not just because I'm Black. So you definitely have to know that about yourself. But I I think I feel like being a part of those affinity groups, they make me feel a little bit more sense of belonging in these spaces, just to have some just to have like ears, people I can bounce ideas off of, people I can talk to candidly when I'm, you know, I may be struggling. Like I know this year, you know, it was just so much going on, just social unrest going on. And I feel like there were so many conversations being had in the firm, like especially during the summer. I feel like every week they wanted to have a meeting and talk about this and talk like, hey, what can we do? How are you feeling? And I'm like, I don't want to, I don't really want to talk to y'all about how I'm feeling today. So I think having those Black leaders that I could talk to and say, hey, you know, this is how I'm feeling. Like, how do you handle yourself in these situations? Like, because, you know, I feel like especially as a Black woman, you don't want to be that person that's like, I don't want to talk. Like you can't like you can't do that without like coming off a certain way. Like you have to be really conscientious of how you talk to people, and how you decline conversations. And so just like I said, like having those people that I could talk to and say and talk to candidly and feel comfortable saying, I don't want to talk. How do I go about this situation? How do I tell them that I don't want to talk and, you know, still be in a good position? So like I said, I'm still pretty young in my career and learning how to navigate these conversations. I feel like having people you can bounce those ideas off is really important.
Yes. I was going to say that literally in my undergrad senior year, my dissertation was about the angry Black women on Wall Street, just addressing how it's being a double minority of being Black and a woman. It doesn't define me, but in the back of my mind, I always have to make sure, okay, I can't say it like that because it's going to come off like this. And it's always going to be in the back of my mind. So I definitely identify with that. Like all my internships, I was always the yes person rather than the no. So that's why when you guys say boundaries and really saying intentional, I'm like, okay, this is what I really need to do to prepare for my career post Vandy. So definitely identify with that.
Exactly, because you can't like even in your career you can get stuck being the yes person, especially when it's like I said, there's so many Black events happening or conversations happening. Oh, can you lead this conversation? Can you lead this conversation? Like actually not today. I can't. So boundaries are definitely important.
Those are all great points. And I think just being Black in corporate environment, there are also just little things that can wear you down a little bit. Like, I hate icebreakers, you know, like, what's your favorite song? And then I'm like doing this mental dance in my head, like, do I tell them the real favorite song or like, you know, it's just like little stuff like that. You know what I mean? But to Thea's point, I think, you know, at Facebook, there is like a really, you know, we have Black at Facebook, we have Black men at Facebook as well. There's also Black women at Facebook. And, you know, I remember the week that George Floyd was killed, murdered, I, the chances of me being like productive at work that week were like small, you know, and I've always been the type of person to just kind of keep it moving, do what I need to do. but that, it just really messed me up. Like the video in particular, I just kept kind of replaying that video in my head, and that just that week was hard for me. And I think having it's no secret that uh, Black people in tech are a small minority, but because Facebook is such a big company at 50,000 people, they're still a pretty decent size and community. Um, and I think having a community to open up to and share stories when, like, I'm over here, frustrated, and like my non-Black colleagues are like do 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 do, like talking about Game of Thrones like nothing else happened, which can be really frustrating. I think having a community to lean on was everything for me. And like, I'm not giving tech companies a pass. There's still so much work that needs to be done in terms of getting more um, people of color within these companies. But I am happy that there's at least a sense of infrastructure and community, other people that I can kind of lean on in those challenging times.
And just speaking on having recruiting Black people into the corporate world or healthcare world or tech world, I would want to know, like, what are your views on D&I initiatives in general? And then also with the retention, because once you've gotten the Black people into the building, but actually keeping them to where they can reach the levels of which they want to go up to the executive level, like Michael. So retention versus recruiting and D&I in your respective industry.
I can start with that. I mean, the challenge in tech, and I think a lot of companies, is that so many new hires come from referrals. So when 90% of the company is racially homogenous, you're going to get a lot of the same. You don't have as many people referring people of color, right? So it's this ongoing cycle. And I think there need to be solutions in place there to address that. I mean, big tech companies, a lot of companies have had these ambitious goals for a while, yet you look at the population of people of color, there's still so much work to do. Now, on the inclusion front, retention, it's a whole nother ball game, right? And I think one of the things, just because I'm passionate about the mental health space, I think something that a lot of companies should consider is how they are supporting the mental health and emotional well-being of people of color as a tool for retention and productivity, right? There's a statistic that just came out saying that the number of people of color seeking help with depression and anxiety has increased 172% since 2019. We know that people of color, their mental health symptoms are more persistent, yet they're less likely to seek treatment. And I think especially, through 2020, when you had the pandemic, communities of color were disproportionately impacted. You had, a racial injustice. Like, we are tired, and that really kind of impacts the way that we show up, impacts our performance and productivity, and also impacts how we interact with, our coworkers and our colleagues. So I would like to see companies really step up, within the emotional health space and wellness space to support, people of color within the realm of, trying to retain and, create a more inclusive environment. But there's so much more that needs to be done. That's just a small piece of it.
Really big on mental health.
Yeah.
Really big on that one.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, literally the best way to include people is to include people. And, in my efforts in that regard, I really focus on emphasizing the Black excellence that is out there. But to James' point, like attracts like. and many of the people I know in strategically placed positions for recruitment mean the best, but they don't know what they don't know. They are blind to what they can't see. And so if the selection board for a position or a group of positions or hiring structure is racially homogeneous, then the people they get will look all like them, and they won't see it. And so, one of the key things for me has been that as people get into better placed positions, we need to make sure that there are more people of color at the table at those board meetings, at the table in those positions, who are part of. And a lot of people I know in medical school have gotten on the medical school recruitment board, and in my positions in the hospitals, get to be the one doing the hiring, so you can actually have an impact on that. But then, this is, to my mind, where it really gets into addressing structural racism, is after you get them there, what are you doing to be thoughtful and intentional as an organization about keeping them? And that, again, has to be, those conversations have to be had at that table. And I tell you what's not gonna happen if you're not sitting at the table is that conversation is not gonna happen because it's uncomfortable. So much rather talk about baseball or something. And so, sometimes, I've been at tables where, people are just railroading a physician, and there's an obvious discrepancy in how other people are treated, where, like I said, you have, as a Black executive or leader, you have much less of a margin of error, whereas people who do worse and look different than you are given 10 times of passes, because people can empathize. You relate to someone that you relate to, and so you can kind of rationalize behavior that you wouldn't rationalize otherwise. And I say this with a lot of empathy for our, non-Black brothers and sisters. Is like, I don't, that's the soft part of racism that sometimes is just a bit, insidious, and we don't see, and they don't see, is that little extra credit given to somebody else, where you don't take that same approach with. So, the Black physician may be judged very harshly for playing music that is actually milder than the music that his white colleague plays in the operating room. And this is, a good example of a real case, or, you find some other ethnicity doing rap lyrics during a procedure. I dare you you will never find me playing rap music during a procedure, because that will be the entire discussion for the next 5 days. How I was wearing a do-rag and rapping and dropping F-bombs, and I've never sworn in the hospital. So, but I think that, to be included, we need to be there, and to further include for other people, and to make space for other really excellent people who look like us. We need to make sure we're speaking up and asking the questions and pointing out the inequities and pointing out the discrepancies. And that's kind of how we shine light on things and disinfect things.
Just to add on to their point, I feel like EY has done a pretty good job this year on just being open to ideas about D&I and how it should look, being open to the discussion, I guess. And so from these conversations, we've had leadership circles be formed. We've had, circles that are just the staff, and different focus groups that say, okay, what do you need at this point in your career? And, especially for us who are younger in our career, what did you need in college that would have helped you get here, or would have helped a friend get here? How can we create that pipeline to get more people here? And then once they are here, how do we keep them here? And, I think that's the hard question, I feel like, is how do we keep people here? Because, the percentage of Black people in consulting, you see it decrease as you get higher up. senior consultants, not so many managers, partners, like the number decreases the higher you go. And so why aren't people staying? And that's the real question. And so some things that we've talked about, or some things that have come out of those conversations is like, how do you connect Black Black professionals to sponsors who are really going to speak out for them and get them those opportunities that will look good on paper and get them to those positions, and having mentors and people who are going to look out for you when you're not in the room. And like Michael said, like you have to, and then once you're in that room, like you have to be ready to speak out and say, okay, this is what this person is doing, and this is why they should be here as well, you know. So being comfortable and being able to have those difficult discussions, I think is really going to be important. But I don't think the responsibility isn't all on those Black professionals. Like it's also on the company to be willing to hear them when they speak, you know. So like I said, like I know EY has put forth a lot of initiatives this year, and I just want to see, you know, right now I just want to see how they turn out. And that's where we are in this space. And I feel like I've heard from some other friends in consulting that the other big four firms are kind of along the same lines. So we'll see how it goes. You know, I feel like I hope it's just not one of those things that's performative, like, oh, because D&I is popular at the moment, like that this topic won't be gone next year, you know? So I feel like all we can do is really hold them accountable for the things that they say they will do. So next cycle, okay, we say we were going to have this conversation. Why haven't we had it yet? Or if we have we followed up on the things that we said we were going to do? Like, just, you know, make sure that the ball keeps rolling.
And to ensure the ball keeps rolling in your respective industries, what are some tips or a piece of advice that you would give to someone who is about to graduate from Vanderbilt to prepare them for what they will be introduced to?
I mean, I would say, like, coming out of Vanderbilt, you've had a great experience, school with a great reputation. Like, just be selective, you know, like be selective with where you go next. You know, try to put yourself in a position where you can show up every day and be your full self and not have to, like, you know, when the icebreaker question comes up, not have to worry about, you know, telling everyone what your favorite real song really is, you know? And like, you can do that by, you know, when you're in the interview process, like just ask the recruiter if they're, you know, regular employees outside of, you know, the recruiting process itself that you can talk to about their experience, you know, other employees that look like you. I just think that that's so important, right? Like, I think maybe you don't have as much flexibility, like when you're coming out of undergrad, you know, you gotta, you know, just get the experience. Um, but when you go through grad school, you've come out, you have a little bit more leverage. Um, you know, you have more to bring to the table, and as such, you can be more selective in where you decide to place yourself. So that would be my advice. Just do everything you can to be in an environment where you can show up and at least be mostly yourself, right?
One piece of advice that I have for people coming out of Owen, I guess especially for people coming out of the MAC or the MSF, or people who are like, you know, 1 year out of undergrad and now 1 year into grad school, is just get all the experience that you can once you start your new career, just for the fact that the more experience you have, the more you'll be able to sell yourself later on, especially if you can make some good connections, get some good reviews, and have people who will vouch for you and, you know, be that person for you. So I say really get all the experience you can, but don't drain yourself. Have those boundaries for sure, but 100%, like if there's something you know you want to do, don't be afraid to ask for it. Say, hey, this is the type of project I want to be on. This is what I see myself doing long term. Like, how can I get there? And give me the experience that will put me in the position to get there. So don't be afraid to speak for yourself.
I think they make really excellent points. I agree with everything that both Thea and James have said. I think for me, the mantra I often emphasize is that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. So be present, and be a part of the thing. And make sure that you think in terms of generating useful mentorship relationships and the mentorship relationships actually go both ways, because as you connect to people who are highly placed, what happens is the higher up you go. Sorry. Is that
Sorry.
me?
No, that was me. Sorry about that. Edit it out.
Sorry. What happens is the higher up you go, the less connection you have to where kind of the rubber meets the road of the business. And so really highly placed executives, they really crave a connection with people who are coming up, because then, it gives them a sense of what's really going on. And so, I try to think about the mentorship and sponsorship relationships in a kind of a bi-directional form. And I think you have to think about those things as you're being intentional, as you're being selective, and as you're making sure that you're being authentic in making those connections. But the idea that you're going to work hard 100% of the time and that's all it's going to take to succeed is something that I was fed on, and I think it's a great idea. It's just not realistic. So you need to think about cultivating relationships, unless of course you're doing something that doesn't require relationships, which is almost impossible to have a business that doesn't require relationships. It's all about relationships. And then, as part of being authentic, try to make sure that if you're doing something, you're doing something where you can actually do what you say you're going to do. And sometimes that's not entirely within your control. But some of the best advice I got actually was one of the Owen staff who said, Michael, it sounds like you're in a position where this position is killing you. And it was an insight. It was weird. She said that, and I thought to myself, wow, that's true. And so don't be afraid to let go of stuff that is truly toxic for you. That's the other thing I would say. And I think that's, for me, if I took anything away from some of the great advice I got from my colleagues and some of my mentors at Owen, is that you, especially coming out of a good business school like Owen, you truly have options. And, you should never allow yourself to be manipulated to fighting to keep a position that is not favorable, if that's helpful.
That could be applied everywhere in life.
Very true. I honestly feel like it's a crystallization of something I read in Sun Tzu, but I keep trying to remember where that comes from. But if you manipulate somebody to fight to defend an untenable position, they've already lost.
No, that's big. Well, we are at the end of our time. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this podcast. And thank you guys, panelists, for actually coming in and talking with us today.
Well, thanks for having us.
Thank you.